Oh, is everyone listening? Is everyone hearing that? We have the opportunity this Easter Sunday to be cracked wide open. And we are talking this Sunday about being broken open, which might sound a little violent and a little less than comfortable. I don't know about anyone else, but have you been feeling a little cracked wide open? A little bit maybe crucified? Ripped from your old life, the way things have always been, how you always work, where you always work, and doing things a little differently. Even if you are retired or you work from home already, there's a different energy in the air now when I go out. There's a different sense of presence in the air, and there's some fear out there. There's a lot of change going on, and there's a lot of love welling up. I don't know if a few weeks ago Greg Bengarelli would have gotten the support from the greater public in the same way when he made the announcement about his daughter dying or their daughter dying. There's heartbreak, but there's also a sense of unity, a sense of oneness that is happening, which does not surprise me. This is really how actually we tend as Americans, as a human race, to respond to crisis. You know, all those movies that are out there are saying, oh, it's going to be looting, it's going to be the end of the world as we know it. And instead, what we have is artists giving away their stuff for free online, people checking in with neighbors that they may not have known before now, or, you know, people in their community that may not be direct neighbors, but are out there. There is that within us, I think, that moves very, very quickly away from the experience of the crucifixion and into that resurrection experience. And I think it's because there's a part of us that knows that, as Ernest Holmes said in his radio show back in 1950, there's nothing to be afraid of in God's world. God's world is the only world there is, and there's nothing to die in God's life, and God's life is the only life there is. What he says is that the real resurrection is from the belief that there are any dead. It's the resurrected Christ that we glorify today, that we join with today, that we recognize in ourselves today. But I do get a little ahead of myself. I always had trouble with the crucifixion because I thought it meant that I had done something wrong, that Jesus got in trouble because I messed up. And he was more than just put on restriction. He was crucified because I was guilty. One of the beautiful things about this teaching is that we get to take another look at all of those stories and traditions and the mythology, which is the encoded wisdom of a culture or a faith tradition. We look at the mythology with new eyes, with adult eyes, as the adult children of God, knowing that the divine lives within us. And suddenly the crucifixion becomes something very, very different. And so I want you to imagine the letter T right in front of you. And on the horizontal line, what you have, and many of you who have taken classes with me have seen me do this. To the right, we have the future. On our right hand, we have the future. That is all the stuff that we might be living in anticipation of, or that we might be afraid of coming down the pike. To our left, we have the past, those things that we might be regretting right now, those things that we might be wishing we were still there, we might be nostalgic about. So as long as we're either in the future or the past, we're not here now. We are not fully present in this moment. And then there's the vertical line of that cross, which is heaven and earth. Now, Jesus is the person who, within the Christian tradition, symbolizes being right between past and future, and in the very space where heaven meets earth. On many crucifixes, on many crosses, Jesus's head is right about where that T is, or right above it in his crown chakra. So that space where God shows up, that immediate moment, that nanosecond, which is the now, which is where heaven and earth are coming together. That is what the crucifixion is about. That is what we are willing to undergo in order to get past, to get free of the old world. I remember hearing that Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith was asked if he was trying to save the world with his teaching, with his ministry. And what he said was, well, which world are we going to try and save? Is it the one in which we don't know our neighbors? The one in which most people are tired because they're overworking? Is it the one in which we know full well that a large chunk of this nation is not doing okay? Where we still have we've come a long, long way in terms of sexism, racism, and all the other isms. We've come a long way in recognizing that we're one, but we have far, far, far to go again. There are greater levels of good. There are deeper levels of knowing that we can get into. And we have to be willing to let go of those things that no longer serve us. And so that's what being broken open is about. It starts with the crucifixion. We take our hands off of and let go of both future and past, and we come here now knowing that we're a new being. And then there's that space between breakdown and breakthrough where we're just broken open. We're in that transitional space. It's the symbolic 3 days within the tomb. Those 3 days, the number 3 is very powerful in many, many different traditions. And there are many traditions where the crucified God, or a story about a crucified God, is gone for 3 days before he comes back. There's so many stories. So that 3 days or 3 weeks, which is, I think, how long we've been kind of shut in right now, there's a rich time there. Now, nobody will ever see it because we're all separate. Because in Jesus's case, he was alone in the cave doing some serious social distancing. When I was a kid, I was told that's because he went into hell to gather up all the souls that had been sent there by accident because we couldn't get into heaven yet. However, again, we get to have that experience and look at it differently. Have the old fall away, all the old lessons that we thought made so much sense, where we thought often people think their worth is derived from their money or what they can do to earn goodwill. And so I don't know about you, but I've had many, many experiences of finding out that the old isn't working. For instance, my printer. I accidentally, perhaps out of frustration, murderized my printer this week and ended up learning the incredibly important life lesson that just because I can make something fit doesn't mean I should. The old get a bigger hammer and force it perhaps is an idea that I have to let go of. So I let go of the old printer and I bought a new one, and I still had to struggle with the idea of this is hard to hook up. This is not going to work. I just wasted $100. Well, a little more than that. I just did all of this stupid stuff because I was still trying to make it work. And when I said, basta ya, and said I was done, suddenly it was working. So there's a need to surrender that happens here. There's a need to allow ourselves to be carried into that grave and then released. If you notice within the story of the crucifixion in the Christian tradition, what happens is an angel rolls away the stone. Jesus doesn't do it, an angel does it. And then he appears first to the women who are, in this case, representing the divine feminine, the new way of being in the world. He steps out into a whole new world, but it's the Christ that is stepping out of the tomb. It is the Christ within you that will emerge from this particular quarantine. If you choose to sit with this tomb experience, if you choose to truly let go of that which has been crucified out of our lives and come into a new world. If you remember correctly, or if you've read it recently, you will find that Jesus, the Christ, meets beingness, or in metaphysical terms, sometimes Mary is translated as love itself, meets that and then goes to find his apostles, the divine masculine. Now they're scared. They're in a world they don't understand. They're waiting to get arrested, so they're locked into a room. And the Christ has to come to them. Remember, consciousness, the change in consciousness always precedes a change in circumstance. The consciousness changes and then the outside world changes. Our being changes and then our doing changes. It's not the other way around usually. And so the Christ appears to the apostles and sets them free from the old room, the old way of being. It wasn't a bad room. It was a great room. I'm sure it was a beautiful room. But it was an old way of being in the world. And so we step out now. We step out now. We have the beautiful opportunity to step out now as new beings, as Christed beings, as consciously Christed beings, and live in the light in a whole new way. Live in a whole new world. I sound very Disney for a moment there, but there's a place within an article called Cosmic Light that Ernest Holmes wrote. And what he says is we need to discover another language to use, a language beyond what we now use, or we can never change our capacities. For beyond all human experience is a light that we must follow. Otherwise, we shall be merely going round and round in a vicious circle, caught in a beautiful trap, still living under the law of illusion or delusion. Again, we have to find another language to use, a language beyond what we now use, or else we can never change our capacities. We have to find a new way of being in the world. And from our human old way of living in that beautiful trap with all our delusions about who we really are, we're never going to get to who we really are. This is beyond all human experience, is this light that we have to follow. This light can only be found beyond all of the psychological tricks that we teach, all of those tools that I teach, all of the tools that the master teacher Jesus taught. All of the Christs that have ever been have taught tools in order to get us to the place where we can let go of the tools and just find that way within us in order to sit within the light that goes beyond human understanding. Jesus' entire life, including the crucifixion, was a way of saying, try this tool on, do what I do. And then you will have the benefit of having learned that. We often talk about what we got out of the crucifixion. Sometimes I wonder why we don't talk about what Jesus got out of it. Jesus, the master teacher, who was the most, in the Christian tradition, is the most out of his own way, the most woke, as it were. What he got out of the crucifixion was that final example, that final teaching moment, and then he got to experience himself as his spiritual being all the time, no longer having to work within human constraints in order to meet us. He could show up as anyone on the road to Emmaus. He's not recognized by his own disciples until he decides to be recognized. He is no longer constrained. He has abilities and powers that a human would not necessarily even understand. And so I invite you to think about this now. What is the world you want to step into? What is the world you are now creating, having been through the cave experience? What we're doing this morning is stepping out of a room that was very, very dark into a bright light. And it might take a few minutes for our eyes to adjust and to see this whole new world that we're living in. It might take a little while before we're ready to live in that place where the whole world is different. Now, I can't tell you what it's going to look like. I can't tell you because we're not out of the cave yet in terms of this quarantine. But I promise you that if we use this time to be ready to go into that light within us so that we can live in the light outside of us, we absolutely will be creating a whole new world. We will be creating a world in which everyone has a home, in which boundaries are only the healthy personal kind, and those big walls that we have up between us and our brothers and sisters in the Christ consciousness, between us and our own Buddha nature and the Christ within us, those walls are going to fall away. Everyone will understand that beauty and art are a new place to pay attention to because that's what's important. There will be forgiveness by us for ourselves, forgiveness of debt, forgiveness of anything we've ever done that we still carry shame about. This world that can work for everyone lies on the outside of the tomb that we might feel like we're in right now. There's a quotation, there's a wonderful poem by Walt Whitman that says, "The moment you stand up and claim your divinity, the moment you stand up and claim your divinity, Christ is reborn in your heart. Buddha rejoices. Muhammad dances upon the mountaintop. Lao Tzu reads approvingly, and the promise of the tree of life is fulfilled." The moment you stand up, you walk out of the cave, you walk out of the tomb of your own old way of being in the world and step into something we don't know what it's going to look like. And so that might be part of the fear. The rest of the poem goes, "And the promise of the tree of life is fulfilled, and I know that the hand of God is the promise of my own. And I know that the Spirit of God is the brother of my own, and all the men ever born are also my brothers, and the women my sisters and lovers." This is what Walt Whitman experienced during his own ecstatic moment. This is what all the great poets and philosophers understood to be the truth of who they really are. This is the truth of who we really are, that Jesus and Buddha and Krishna and all the other teachers, including Ernest Holmes, have been trying to tell us. But we have to stand up and claim our own divinity. It's not enough to take down the cross and make a pedestal out of it. That's not going to work. We have to be willing to step out into the light and just stumble around for a few minutes, maybe because our eyes haven't adjusted. And let that be the moment of our collective freedom, of our collective Christedness. Now that is the great truth about Easter. There are no dead. There are only those of us who have risen from our old beliefs, who now recognize the Christed self that we are. And so what else is there to do except pray? That is all there is to do, all there ever will be to do, is to speak the word of God in joy and allow ourselves that celebration that is how we know prayer. And so join me, if you will, within the Christ consciousness and know with me that we have arisen, that life itself is now pouring through the world in a whole new way, that the light of God has taken on a brightness we couldn't perceive before. The divine being is, and the divine being is all there is, and those words have new meaning and new juice here now on earth as we experience them. We are awash in a celestial light. We can experience spirit bodies are very, very different, lovely and wonderful and good. These light bodies that we live in now. The idea are just left behind from. I celebrate the good that now is. I rise up to the occasion, knowing I'm not alone, but all of my brothers and sisters are there with rising up, ascending into our yet to be, claiming Christ it is that we are, and the world that works for everyone. Absolutely know with every fiber of my being that we are all on this path together, that we are all rising up together right here and now. Bless all my colleagues